Hi, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. Okay, so my name is Laureen Mahler. I'm from Aalto University, and my objective today is to essentially give you a designer's perspective on material-driven research, and hopefully to demonstrate how designers and also an ecological approach to design, which includes interdisciplinary work, is fundamental to achieving our sustainability and innovation goals. To do that, I'm going to be talking about tessellations. So just a quick couple words about myself. I'm a doctoral researcher and designer. I work with the Bioinnovation Center Doctoral School on a project called origami, which is early stage research that I'm presenting for you today. That research is based on cellulose-based metamaterials, specifically looking at natural plant fibers and existent waste and side streams to create tessellations. And in the realm of tessellations, alternative novel packaging. I am going to define what a tessellation is, so don't worry if you're not sure, but I'll do that in just a minute. Firstly, I wanted to start with this quote, which I think really explains my approach to research as a designer. Placing emphasis on materiality enables us to reconsider the building blocks of the design process from the bottom up. We are beginning to see that alternative systems of production and consumption are possible, and we're recognizing that material innovation will be crucial to achieving this. I think this applies to all of the work that we're seeing here today, but for me, there are two important things here. One is the materiality, the material-driven innovation. The other is rethinking the design process. And of course, as a designer, that's quite key to my own interests. So I've already mentioned that my research is based on tessellations and bio-based materials. In addition to that, it's exploratory research. So yes, it's material-driven, but it's also practice-led, which means that much of the research that I do is based on the practice of designing, working with raw materials, sketching, prototyping, building things, constructing things. It's also highly interdisciplinary, so I work with paper science, mathematics, visual design, and also biofabrication. I already mentioned packaging, but specifically thinking about how we can rethink packaging, how we use it, what it is, what happens to it at the end of its life cycle. So is it biodegradable, is it regenerative, or does it go on to a different kind of a use once its original use is complete? And to do that, the lens that I use is what I refer to as the designer as a maker. This is not a new idea, but we are rethinking how and what it means in our current climate. So what does it mean for the designer to return to making in a meaningful way that actually has impact? And that, in my view, has to do with localized circularity. So all of these different elements of my research are essentially under the umbrella of ecology. And I wanted to take just a brief moment to define what design ecology is. In the broadest sense, ecology is the study of relationships between organisms in an environment. Put slightly differently, it's organism-environment mutuality. From a design perspective, it broadens a little bit. So I think this quote from Guattari is an excellent one. Ecology is a process of re-singularization, a re-establishment of the connections between nature, consciousness, and society. And this, to me, is a fundamental definition because it is not only environment, it's also community, society, and consciousness, how we think about products and raw materials. The question was raised earlier, how do we define value? This very much has to do with that. So an ecological approach to design, in my view, facilitates innovation, interdisciplinary collaboration, as well as sustainability. Back to the question of tessellations. What are they? I've brought a sample here. It's quite small, but nonetheless, this is an origami tessellation. It comes from the Japanese ori for fold and kami for paper. And I don't do representational origami. You can see this is quite different. It's called origami sakai, and it is technical folding. So a origami tessellation is a periodically repeated pattern that is folded from a single sheet of paper. No cutting, no gluing. Again, it's quite small, but I will have prototypes of these later at the research stands if you're interested. This idea of the single sheet without any additional sort of fabrication is quite interesting in terms of the future potential of tessellations. So there are thousands of tessellations. These are just a few images. What I focus on are tessellations that are three-dimensional. They're highly kinematic, dynamic. As you can see from this sample, they collapse and they pop open or deploy. And they're quite aesthetic structures in addition, which of course from a design perspective is vital. So I look at these structures in connection with alternative novel packaging. And specifically, I look at the structural design, so mathematics. I'm not going to be talking about mathematics today, but I will be talking about the material composition, as well as, to some extent, the mechanical properties of these materials, as well as the making process that brings all of them together. So as packaging material, tessellations have an incredible amount of potential. They're super strong, they have great mechanical properties, recyclability, biodegradability, and so on. These are all important factors that can replace, for example, plastics in packaging. So the really early stages of this research started in the lab, and I created a thorough sampling of laboratory hand sheets, of course including bleached and unbleached softwood, but also different alternative fibers to figure out what exactly goes into the paper sheets that these tessellations are made from. After that, of course, is making the pulp in the lab, then pressing and drying the sheets, and then there was extensive mechanical property testing for each of these iterations of sheets, whether they were made from wood or alternative fibers. One example is the fiber length analysis you can see on the bottom right here. So all of this was done in the lab as a preparation for a sort of expanded, comprehensive investigation of raw materials. How can we make sheets? How do the sheets behave from a molecular level up through their behaviors when folded into these complex tessellated structures? The materials exploration kind of went into two different categories. I call these biopulps, and I make standalone sheets from them, but I also use them as additives for softwood. So thinking about how we can actually extend wood resources or make them more valuable with the addition of alternative materials. The natural plant fibers that I work with include seaweed, mushroom, nettle, flax, wild hemp, not of the cannabis variety, as well as looking at different fabrication processes like retting and milling. This, for example, on the bottom is a milled nettle fiber that was harvested in Helsinki. So the second category of materials was side stream fibers, and those include what's called cotton dust, which is a side stream from recycling post-consumer textiles. And this is actually a dust that is, the fibers are too short for textiles, but they're actually quite long for paper. And this worked really well in terms of making sheets for tessellations. I've also looked at cutoffs from linen production. All of these different biopulps that I'm describing show really promising results. I don't have any graphs to show you today because that's not the focus of this particular presentation, but they were quite successful in terms of their mechanical properties, how they work for tessellations, the strength, the flexibility that they encompass. I'm happy to talk in more detail about the mechanical property details after the presentations if you're curious. So the current research is focusing on looking at bio-based materials beyond just fibers, and there are two ongoing projects in that regard. One of those is combining biofoam derived from wood with these biopulp sheets in order to enhance and optimize the properties of both materials. This is the top image that you can see here. This is a duplexed biopulp sheet with wood foam or biofoam. And the other thing that I'm looking at currently is creating a mycelium cellulose composite. The idea is that this would serve as a living agent that can actually grow a tessellation rather than folding it, but still be a dynamic functional sheet or tessellation. So going back to this idea of the designer as a maker, I think from an ecological design perspective, this research, which is highly interdisciplinary, also reimagines what it means for the designer to make, for a designer to work in an interdisciplinary way in the lab with scientists, with engineers, etc., and be really truly an active participant in every stage of the design process. And that goes back to the concept of resingularization. This is a form of a microloop. It's small scale, it's early stage research, but the idea is that the designer has firsthand raw material origin experience, firsthand experience with processing, with fabrication, post-fabrication, as well as the impact that this has on communities, the relationships with regulators and industrial partners, life cycle extension of these design objects after they go out into the world. this is just a short visualization of what I'm talking about. Essentially, the designer maker is at the center of this circularity that starts with the environment, that starts with raw materials and responsibly using them. A design object is created, it has function and messaging, it's produced with the help of industrial partners, perhaps spawned by regulations, and then it has an impact on communities and society and people, and then it returns to the environment. And with the designer at the center of this, it changes everything. It changes how we think about innovation, it changes how we think about sustainability and engage with it. In my view, this model provides us with an exploratory framework for rethinking completely how we design things with innovation and sustainability as the primary objectives. That is all that I have, so thank you very much. I look forward to your feedback.
Thank you so much, Laureen. Do we have questions in the audience? I have some from the chat. So how do you see the role of design and designers in a very cost-driven packaging market? Is it possible to design things that are both affordable and sustainable?
That is an excellent question and a difficult question. So obviously the research that I present here is early stages. It's very exploratory. I think it is possible, but it requires a level of interdisciplinary and a sort of hands-on approach that is a little bit missing from the world of design right now. So I think we need to push in that direction.
Yes, Ali.
Ali Harlin, hello. So I'm from VTT. So because packaging is many times considered as a material or a object, but in real packaging is a system. So how far you see that your work is touching it, and how far you want to like to influence on the total delivery process with your work?
Yeah, also a challenging question. I think, as I mentioned, this is exploratory, but of course, the packaging industry is huge. It's a system, as you say. It's slow to change. And I think there are elements of these tessellations and how we make them that I'm working with in a fundamental exploratory way that will be built upon. And what I would ideally imagine is that some of the work I'm doing with structures and material composition would then go on to integrate itself into the larger system. That might be idealistic, but...
Thank you. We have a question regarding the cotton. So where is the cotton dust procured from? Does the amount of this dust produced in a scale that it can be industrialized or scaled up?
So the cotton dust comes from a company called Restar, which some of you might be familiar with here in Finland. I can't really answer, to be honest, whether the production is high enough to be industrialized. However, it is plentiful. I will say that. On my small scale, there's more than enough, but I don't know the exact numbers of how much is produced. Thank you.
6,000 tons, okay. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Laureen.
Thank you.